This is the country of a fair go. I think Australian people deserve a fair go in their legal system.
It is a tragedy. Every year, something like 10,000 Australians come before the courts unrepresented. Every year, something like 160,000 Australians are turned away from the CLCs when they come seeking advice because of inadequate funding.
For 40 years I've been a criminal lawyer, the last 15 of those as a judge. And the observable situation with legal aid has never been worse.
Legal aid means tests currently cover only 8% of the Australian population. 14% of the Australian population lives below the poverty line. How can this be? Could you contemplate a Medicare system which covered only 8% of the Australian population? Over the last 5 years, cuts to legal aid across this country have meant that 45,000 people did not get legal aid. Can you imagine 45,000 people standing here today at this rally between these three courts in this state being the ones who missed out on legal aid? Can we actually say to them in Law Week this year that the Australian system does in fact deliver equality before the law? And who are the people? Who are these 45,000 people? What sorts of people or categories do they fall into? A lot of them are young people who will be facing magistrates' courts all over the country without a grant of legal aid unless it's likely that they are going to go to jail. They will be women who are coming to the courts seeking protection in domestic violence cases but being denied legal aid. They are Indigenous Australians at a time when the rates of imprisonment of Indigenous Australians are higher than they have ever been. ATSILS is underfunded and they face further cuts.
A magistrate cannot be expected, with the volume of cases that they hear each day, to be able to act as the lawyer for the accused, because that's what's being asked of them. Within the 5 to 10 minutes that they have for each case, how can they extract the full circumstances of the alleged offending, the accused's role or lack of it in that offending, advise the accused, find out all the background and current circumstances of the accused's life, and determine the appropriate sentence? It just can't be done. It's not their role. But in reality, they are often the only person who is even talking to this accused.
It's about everyday Australians. It's about your mother. It's about your father. It's about your brother. It's about your sister. It's about your grandmother who's about to lose her home because she's been scammed. And there's been this incredible news about the scamming of the elderly over the last few days. It's those people, those Australians who can't get legal advice, who can't get represented, and as a consequence, ladies and gentlemen, lives are being destroyed. And at the end of the day, that is what this is all about. Lives are being destroyed because people are left to fend for themselves in front of the courts. It is simply unacceptable, it's unsustainable, and in a society like Australia, it is unacceptable.
You'll notice this isn't a partisan affair. We want both parties to commit the appropriate resources to legal aid because, as Stuart says, legal aid matters.
There's lots of international evidence that shows that something like $1 of expenditure will save $7 of expenditure on other state services. It goes up to $26 in some research reports. And ordinary people know the sense of that. You know, if you lose your house, potentially children can go into care, parents can go on to benefits, there's those knock-on costs to the state. So it makes sense to invest in legal aid.
But it cannot be a fair system when only one side gets the money to be represented in court. The Commonwealth continues to increase funding to investigating organisations such as the AFP, ASIC, or even creating new paramilitary organisations such as Border Force. But it continues to reduce the funding that could remotely balance that system.
Politicians promise rights. Politicians promise legislation. We have tons, myriads of legislation. Platitudes often on the statute book, I call it. Because the thing with legislation, the thing with promises of rights, they go, they become law, but those laws mean nothing, nothing, unless you have the means to enforce them. And that's why legal aid is so important. You need that means in a common law system to enforce those rights. And politicians understand that, and you should hold them to account and ensure that they give you the resources to ensure rights actually mean something.
The Australian government is not delivering on the commitment to equality before the law. And they need to do something about it, and they need to do something about it now.